Hello. Good morning, everybody. Okay, I'm gonna get the nerves out. Thanks, man. Thanks for that little introduction. It's true, my name is James Han, also known as Uzuhan, based out of Atlanta. I do hip hop music, and I've been touring internationally, doing shows in the US, and pretty much like God has taken me all over the place. You know, He's even taken me to churches, doing some workshops, never to speak like this, to be honest, but it's been a fun journey to say the least, and I'm glad to be here, and I'm here because I love the church. There's no way around it. I love what God is doing in the church, and I believe that He's going to use the church to change this world. But what I want to emphasize, and I don't want to lose track of this, I feel like sometimes the church hasn't loved creatives back, and that's something I want to touch upon, because for me, being in the marketplace, I feel like there's a lot of things that isn't spoken because we don't get this kind of platform. So I'm glad to be here, and I have a little bit to share. So I'll start with a story. It starts with me and my mom. We were getting breakfast together, and we were at a cafe, and we have it's a son and mom kind of moment, and we end up running into her pastor and his wife. And they're like, exchanging pleasantries and doing all these things. And then they're like, our daughter's actually doing really well, by the way. She's in finance, she's in New York, she's making lots of money, she's so successful, I love it. And my mom, she's like, oh yeah, cool. We go back to our seats, and then she's like annoyed. She's like, did you see how this lady, talked about her daughter? It was so annoying. And I was like, Mom, why are you mad at them? Like, they're just proud of their daughter. Like, don't you do the same thing for me, like to your friends? And then, yeah, she lets out a big sigh, and she's like, don't do this to me, James. It's hard for me. And for me, it broke my heart. I literally ran to the bathroom and cried over the sink, right away, and it's because I felt like everything that I've done up to this point didn't matter. Like, I wasn't someone that you could brag about. My achievements they weren't good enough for you, and I was hurt because I was not good enough being a musician for her. And I think just being someone, I just wanted to be someone that was proud, she could be proud of, And the message that I got from her was that what I created didn't matter. And it makes me wonder, I wonder if the church is guilty of doing the same thing as my mom. I wonder if we've made the creative feel like they don't matter. Like, what they love so much is just invisible. It makes me think, have we promoted linear and logical thinkers above creatives and entrepreneurs? Is that something that we're doing too much of? I can name a long list of pastors, missionaries, theologians who would be the heralded example of what to become for our youth. But do we ever see musicians and artists in that list? I believe that that probably doesn't happen because I feel like the church isn't necessarily a place where we're promoting that kind of gift of creativity. Rather, we get a lot of warnings. People are like, oh, you want to be an artist? Be careful. It's going to be a hard road. You're going to be poor. Don't get influenced by the world. Don't be consumed by the world. And to that, I think, okay, church, well, we first have to look at ourselves. Sometimes when I walk into some buildings, some churches, I'm like, is this a church or a business? When you say being consumed by the world, we got to be honest about the metrics we use to measure church success.
Come on.
Risk analysis, a number of baptisms, conversion rates. Is it really the creatives who have to worry about being consumed by the world? Is it, and why is it that creatives feel invisible in the church then? Tell me why. We get to design the pamphlets, we get to get all the wall installations, we get to do that, so we have opportunities, and churches are doing that really well. But do you ever have creatives in the board meetings? Do you have creatives making the liturgy? I think creativity is more than just music, more than just designing stuff. I think, and I believe that musicians and creatives are the prophetic voices of our generation. They speak truth to the brokenness of this world, and they make known to the world the things that God lays on their heart, and then speaks it. They speak it out. So I love this band called Reliant K, and yeah, shout out to them. And they made a song called Deathbed, if you guys are familiar with their discography. It's kind of more that, it's one of the last songs that you might have missed. And I just love this song because it does speak truth to the brokenness of the world, and it shows the power of prose. I'll just show you a little bit of their lyrics. It goes, I bowled about 6 times a week. The bottle of Beam kept the memories from me. Our marriage had taken a 7-10 split, and along with my pride, the ex-wife took my kids. And I love that because in 4 lines, he described the entire anguish and pain in this man's life and his failed marriage in 4 lines. What it would take maybe, pastors' entire series to try to convey this, I'm just saying this is how powerful music is. This is how powerful it can be. And the thing about even me sharing this, I'm sure there are people out there who are like, but did he get saved? We're so worried that they're going to be saved, that conversion rate is hit. But for me, what I loved about the song was not that he did eventually get saved. He gave his life to Jesus, but that messy road to redemption, that journey, that's what they highlighted. And I love that. That's the kind of voice that we need to hear more of in the church. That's what I want to hear more of. When we surround ourselves, especially by people who think differently than us, we start experiencing more of God, actually. The thing that you might be very afraid of, you actually end up seeing more of God's face. So as a creative, I truly believe that when we create, we're tapping into God's heart. And I want the church to be a place where young people, young believers, can feel like they can create. Because if we don't make room for them in the church, they're going to run to the world. As if they're not already doing that. Because they go to the world because they want to find a voice because they can't find it in the church. So what are we afraid of? It makes me wonder, is it because we don't understand creatives? Is it because if we don't understand them, it's easier to push them to the margins? I don't think that's the way we have to do it. We have to bring them back into the fold. We have to be a place where they can express themselves, actually have some power. Throughout the Bible, I see God's creativity in creation. I see how the Bible is put together. I see nature. I see the intricacies of the creativity of God. When I listen to the teachings of Jesus, I see his creativity in the parables and his storytelling. Creativity is in the Bible. We don't need to be so afraid. So then it makes me think, are we afraid of losing power? Are we afraid we're going to lose influence? Because, creatives are going to be and already are the big influencers in this world, whether we like it or not. So can you respect their perspective enough to give them power? Even for pastors, have you ever thought maybe when you're doing your sermon prep, have you ever thought to bring in a creative to sit in with you? Have you ever given them the opportunity to guide the entire liturgy, or even how you are, making the pillars of your church, how you're building and doing all these things? Have you just considered that? That's a freebie. Just letting y'all know. I'm letting you guys know, but. And another thing, while I'm talking about all these things, I just want to remind you that giving power in the church and this suggestion that I'm giving, it not just applies to creatives, it's for women too. It's for people of color. It's not just for a light-skinned immigrant like me. It's for dark-skinned people too. So I don't want us to forget about that. Because if we're talking about the future of the church, we can't forget about the marginalized, the ones who've been pushed to the margins. And that's why I'm glad I'm here to speak on behalf of those who feel like they've been on the margins. The youth are growing up in a diverse world. And it's strange when they walk into a place where everyone thinks the same, everyone looks the same, because their world is so diverse. And when they see churches not reflecting what they see in the world, they're just going to think, this ain't for me. Period. That's how I feel a lot of times. That's how my creative peers feel a lot of the times. I know I'm not the only one who's cried over a sink feeling so rejected. I think back to that moment with my mom a lot, and I remember that feeling that feeling of rejection, feeling minimalized, like that's something that I've also felt from the church. And it pains me that she doesn't understand the power of creativity, but it's not her approval that I need. It actually has led me to press into God's character more and know that I'm tapping into the divine when I create, that God is well pleased with me because he's called me his own. Yeah. So I think it's time for us as the church to bring the creatives back into the fold. Amen. We can't just keep them on the fringes, y'all. We can't. Let's recapture the image of God in our people, giving dignity to those who are left outside. So to wrap things up, I say all this because I want our young people, I want the next generation to look back to the old when the baton is passed, and I want us to shout praises about how the generation before us believed in us, how they gave us opportunities, how they prayed for us, how they saw us. I don't want us to be just, this is kind of the lingo nowadays. We're just like, well, older gen, they're all right. I don't want that kind of conversation. I'm here in hopes that a lot of the older gen would see us and be able to hear us. So I have a few things. Maybe it's like the next step. Maybe the next step is even giving up part of your ministry to a creative or a younger person. Maybe that's the next step for you. Maybe even more than that is maybe it's time for you to hand off your entire ministry to somebody who's been there, a younger person that's been wanting to step up. But you've just been waiting to give the baton. You've been waiting, and you're like, God, I don't know if it's time yet. Maybe today's the time to do that and trust God with it. Or maybe it's as simple as going to the creative in your church, especially if you're the pastor. I don't know if we have too many pastors here, but going to the creatives in your church and just being like this. Just say, hey, we support you. Our church is behind you. We believe in you. We love what you're creating in this world. So keep creating in Jesus' name. We support you. I imagine if you commission your artists to be like that, I feel like there would be a big change in the church. I really believe that. So let's bring creatives back into the fold of the church. That's what I really want to see. So thank you so much for your time.